Well, hello, and welcome to another segment of The Truth About Your Relationship. I am Dr. LaWanda N. Evans, licensed professional counselor, healthy relationship expert, and relationship therapist. So today's segment of The Truth About Your Relationship is all about communication, how we communicate in relationships, how we convey our messages in our relationships. And I'm going to talk to you about different things that you can do to improve the communication in your relationship. Communication is one of the most important things or one of the most important skills that you can actually learn to help improve your relationship. So think about this. When you hear the word communication, what is the first thing that comes to mind? You know, many a times people think just because they are talking that they are communicating or conveying the message that they want their mate to actually get or to understand. But most of the time when we are talking, it doesn't mean that we're actually communicating, especially if our mates don't understand. They have a difficult time really getting what it is that you really want to say. That basically means that you're not really communicating effectively. And what you're saying, they're having a difficult time really catching on. And so sometimes we have to change how we communicate in our relationships in order for things to get better. It's very important to do your own self-evaluation so that you can see how you communicate. Just because you make a statement doesn't mean that you have communicated. Just because you made a request or even asked a question, that doesn't mean that you have communicated. When you would know that you have communicated, number one, when your mate feels that he or she understands, when they feel understood, when they feel heard, when they feel listened to, when you're able to repeat back what you heard them say for clarification purposes and to ensure you actually heard that's when you know that you have actually communicated in your relationship. So let's look at a definition of communication. And this is mine, Dr. Evans. This is my definition of communication. You may have your own definition, but this is how I see communication. And I base this on many years of working with couples, having over 10,000 hours of working with couples and really focusing on communication and really getting couples to really dialogue and communicate with one another. So the definition that I have is communication is the ability to express your needs, wants, desires, issues, concerns, and challenges in such a way that your mate understands, you feel heard, you feel listened to, and you also feel understood. And so there's a lot that goes into that in order for this to actually happen in your communication with your mate. Now, there are some things that go on in our relationships or things from the past that actually hinder us or prevent us or impact how we communicate in our relationships. So one of those things that actually hinder us, or I would say impact us and impact how we communicate in relationships, is our family and childhood experiences. Unmet needs impact how we communicate in our relationship. Having ongoing problems impacts how we communicate in our relationship. Lack of skill impacts how we communicate in our relationship. And personality differences also impact how we communicate in our relationship. So the first one I talked about was family and childhood experiences. Think about this for a moment. What did you see? What did you hear? What did you feel? And what did you learn about communication when you were growing up? Many a times we communicate in relationships the same way we saw our caregivers communicate, the same way we saw our parents communicate, the same way we saw family members or friends or people who actually helped raise us communicate. If you take a look at yourself and you take a step back, the way you communicate is probably how you saw your caregivers or parents communicate growing up. And many a times that impacts how we communicate in our relationships. If we can be honest for a moment and we think about some of the things that we say in relationships, if we think about how we convey messages in relationships, whether it's speaking loud whether it's talking negatively, whether it's, being very forceful with our words or very gentle with our words, or even stonewalling and not saying anything at all. What you saw growing up and how you saw communication actually playing out in your childhood experiences is probably how you communicate now in your relationship. So we tend to repeat the patterns of the past, and we tend to repeat what we saw and what we heard growing up. And we bring those things into our relationships. So the second thing that impacts how we communicate in relationship is unmet needs. Whenever there's a need that has not been met and you have a difficult time expressing that need or expressing that want, it impacts how you communicate in your relationship. Think about yourself. Think about your relationship. Think about the needs that are not being met. How do you communicate or express what you need in your relationship? If you have a difficult time doing that, or you're doing it in a very critical and judgmental way, that is impacting your ability to communicate in your relationship. The next thing that impacts how we communicate in our relationship is when there's ongoing problems or conflicts in the relationship. Those problems that keep coming up over and over again usually cause people to stonewall each other, usually cause people to shut down and don't talk to each other, and it causes the inability to communicate effectively whenever there are ongoing problems and ongoing conflicts. The next thing that impacts how we communicate in relationships is lack of skill. Because we bring how we communicate from past relationships, from our families, from growing up, from those experiences, we usually learn how to communicate based on the experiences that we have had. Communication is a skill that has to be taught. It has to be learned, and it has to be practiced every day. Just because you talk to your friends a certain way, or just because you saw your mom or your dad or your caregiver speak to each other in a very negative way, or they communicated very ineffectively, doesn't mean that that was right. Because many a times when we bring that into our relationships, we communicate that way and we're actually hurting the person that we're in a relationship with. Because remember, we tend to repeat the same patterns. If you even, like I said, if you just take a step back and look at your own self and look at how you communicate, how you can convey your messages, you saw that somewhere. That was actually formed in you from some place, and usually it's from childhood experiences and what we saw growing up and what our past relationships actually, how those past relationships actually impacted us as well. So lack of skill is another thing that impacts how we communicate in relationship. And communication, as I stated, is a skill that has to be taught, it has to be learned, and you have to practice learning a new way to communicate. You have to practice this on a daily basis. So think about your communication skills and even talk to your mate. Rate the way you communicate on a scale from 1 to 10. 10 being the highest and 1 being the lowest. Look at yourself. Do an evaluation on yourself. And then after you do the evaluation on yourself, then sit down and talk to your mate. Ask your mate. On a scale from 1 to 10, 1 being the lowest and 10 being the highest, how do I communicate in our relationship? And don't be afraid to ask this question, and don't get so defensive when they begin to express to you that it may be a 5 or it may be a 4, it may be a 3, but whatever number they choose, what you want to do is ask the question, so what makes it a 5? Tell me some things that I can do better. What are some things that I've said that have probably hurt you? How can I say things differently? What are some areas that you feel as if I should improve on when it comes to communication? See, it takes a very mature person in a mature relationship in order to have a conversation like this, in order to have a dialogue like this. The purpose of your relationship is to help you grow into being a better person. And so let's start with the communication part. Let's let's start improving your communication by having a dialogue with each other about what you need to do different and how you should improve the way you communicate with one another. And so the last thing that impacts how we communicate in relationships is our personality differences. We all come into relationships with something. We all have a different type of personality. We bring our personalities into our relationships, and most of the time our personalities clash. And this is the thing, having an understanding about each other will actually help you to better understand the personality of the person that you're in a relationship with. So personality differences is another thing that impacts how we communicate in a relationship. Now, I have some other things that impact communication in a relationship. And I want you to really take a look at these things and see if any of these things are things that you are actually doing. And then you want to look at yourself and change how you are communicating in your relationship and change the things that you're doing in a relationship in order to convey your message. So here's some other things that impact communication in a relationship. Wanting to or trying to change your mate. Trying to persuade your mate to see things your way. Always wanting to be right. Whether you're right or not, you always want to be right and can't nobody tell you anything. You don't even listen to what anybody has to say. You don't even listen to what your mate has to say because guess what? You are always right. This is a hindrance to communication in your relationship. Another thing, wanting something about your mate's personality to change. Trying to change your mate's personality to fit your way of doing things or your way of seeing things. That's a form of manipulation, which is also a form of witchcraft, trying to control a person's personality to fit what you want them to do instead of allowing that person to be who they have been called to be or who God has made them into being. And then another thing that impacts how we communicate in a relationship is when we forget the goal and the purpose. When we forget and lose focus of what we are trying to accomplish. When you begin to focus more on you said this or you said that or you didn't do this and this is how it goes and I'm right and you're wrong and you just don't want to yield, you don't want to compromise, you have basically forgotten the goal. See, whenever you're communicating with someone, you always have to keep the goal in mind. What is the purpose? Why are we communicating? What are we talking about? What are we wanting to accomplish? And when you forget those things, it causes all types of issues and challenges in the relationship. And so one of the things we want to remember when it comes to communication, it is both what you say and it's also how you say it. So begin to look at yourself. Begin to look at how you bring up issues and challenges in your relationship. Begin to look at how you communicate in your relationship and begin to ask yourself, what am I willing to do different in order to improve the communication that's going on in my relationship? There is a way to bring up issues and challenges without hurting each other. There's a way to communicate in your relationship without beating each other up, without hitting below the belt, without always trying to be right. And it doesn't always have to be a power struggle. Whenever you're communicating in your relationship and that communication always results in a conflict, that's the number one flag that tells you we have a difficult time communicating with each other. But most of the times what couples do, the communication ends in a conflict, and what they do, they just stop talking to each other. And then they decide to sweep it under the rug, and then something else happens, and then that builds up, and that builds up, and that builds up, and then before you know it, you just totally stop talking to each other because you don't know how to have a conversation without the conversation leading into a conflict. And there is a way that you can do that. So I'm going to give you some ways to improve communication in your relationship. The number one, listen to your mate's thoughts and feelings without interrupting. Number two, don't argue your viewpoint or point of view. Just listen. Number three, remove all distractions. Number four, and wait a minute. Number three, remove all distractions. That means cut off your cell phone. or put it on silent. Get off of social media, turn it off, and pay strictly attention to your mate without any distractions. Number 4, ask questions for clarification and understanding. Number 5, don't justify your actions or behaviors. Number 6, when your mate expresses how he or she feels, don't take it personal. It is not about you. Just because they are expressing how they feel, what's going on with them, don't make it about you. It is not your time right now. Whenever you give your mate the opportunity to speak, whenever you give your mate the opportunity to express how he or she feels, express their thoughts, express their opinions, don't take it personal. It's not about you. It's not a personal attack on you. This is all about how that person feels and what's going on with that person. So, number 7, this is very, very important. You want to repeat back what you heard your mate say for clarification purposes. The reason why this is so important, and I encourage all my couples to do this, is because many times what you heard is not what was said. Think about how many times you have tried to communicate something with your mate, with your husband, your spouse, whomever, and they interpret what you said in such a way where they made it to be something that it was not. So you can say something to somebody, and just because you said it to them doesn't mean they heard you. So one of the most important things is you want to repeat back what you heard your mate say for clarification purposes. And one of the ways that you can do that is what you want to say is, can I repeat back what I heard you say? Because I want to make sure I heard you. I want to make sure I understand. And then another great thing that you can do that I have people doing, write it down. Because many times what they heard or what you heard is not what was said. I have been in situations many times where I have expressed something or I've said something, and I asked the person, so what did you hear me say? And they told me something totally different. I'm like, that is not what I said. And we had to go back, because what happens is when we're communicating, many times people are already preparing their response. So therefore, they're preparing a response and they have no clue as to what you have said. They heard you, but what they have done is taken parts of what you have said and made it out to be something that they think it is or what they want it to be. Or they get very defensive and they switch and twist and change things around instead of repeating exactly what they heard you say. So you want to make sure that you repeat back what you heard your mate say for clarification purposes. Doing this can actually decrease the amount of conflicts and issues and challenges in your relationship if you would learn to do this. Number 8, show interest and be engaged in the dialogue. When you're showing interest, when you're communicating with your mate, it's okay to nod. It's okay to make sure you lean forward, making sure you are listening attentively, not creating your response. You're focusing on what you're hearing. You're listening for understanding. You're making sure that you're being very caring and very polite. And you want to make sure that you don't display a very dismissive type of personality when your mate is communicating with you. And then number 9, you want to be understanding as well. Number 10, you don't want to be judgmental or critical. You don't want to force them to see things your way. You don't want to tell them how they feel. Oh my God, I see this all the time. Couples trying to tell each other how they feel. You are not that person. Give that person the opportunity to feel the way he or she feels. Let them own their own feelings, and you don't try to tell them how they feel. And then the last thing you don't want to do, you don't want to tell them that you don't believe that they feel that way. How can you tell a person that you don't believe that they feel that way? You are not that person. You're not on the inside of that person. So for you to say, I don't believe that you feel that way, that's a slap in the face, especially when they're trying to communicate with you that, hey, this is what's going on with me. This is what's happening with me. So these are the things that you can do to improve communication in your relationship. If you can take these tools and implement them into your relationship on a daily basis, the communication in your relationship would get better. The communication in your relationship would improve. But the thing about it, you got to do the work. I tell couples this every day. When you're coming to couples counseling, or even you go to a workshop, a seminar, a conference, and I just finished a 2-day seminar with couples this past weekend. One of the things that I always say is you got to do the work. I don't care how many conferences you go to. I don't care how many seminars you attend. I don't care how many workshops you go to. I don't care how many counseling sessions you go to. If you don't put in the work, your relationship is not going to get better. If you don't use the tools that your counselor is giving you, if you don't use the tools that the seminar presenter is giving you, your relationship is going to stay the same. You got to do the work. If you choose to be in a relationship, just know that there's going to be a lot of work involved, and things are not going to get better if you don't use the tools. You have to be intentional about the work that you do the work. It is so important. You can have all the books in the world. You can have all the manuals. You can have everything. But if you don't use the tools, your relationship is not going to get better. If you don't do what it takes, if you don't take these tools that I've just given you and begin to implement them into your relationship, begin to practice them daily. You don't have to practice them all at once, but at least implement 2 or 3 that you can practice on a daily basis to help your relationship get better. So in closing, communication doesn't just happen in a relationship. It's a skill that has to be taught and practiced every day. Are you willing to change how you communicate in your relationship to get better results, to decrease conflicts, confusion, and frustration? Thank you all so much. This has been Dr. LaWanda N. Evans with another segment of The Truth About Your Relationship, ways to improve communication in your relationship. I will see you all next week for another segment of The Truth About Your Relationship. Oh, and before I forget, I just finished a 2-day couples seminar this past weekend, which was awesome. I am hosting another relationship seminar for those who are dating, those who are engaged, for those who are newlyweds, those who have been married, maybe, 1 to 6 years. And we're going to focus on communication. We're going to focus on managing conflict. And so I am offering my next seminar. It's actually going to be June 15th. But that Saturday in June, the 3rd Saturday in June, I am offering another relationship seminar. And then I'm offering another one that's going to be offered in October as well. And so I really want to help as many couples as possible, because I believe that improving your communication is one of the things that will help your relationship to get better, in addition to some other things that can help your relationship get better. But we can learn how to talk to each other, and we can learn how to communicate with each other. We can learn how to manage conflicts a little bit better. So I hope to see you at my next relationship seminar, which is going to be the 3rd Saturday in June. It is called The Truth About Your Relationship, 7 Ways to Have a Better Relationship, 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work. And so I'm going to bring in a lot more information at this particular seminar to really help you to learn how to communicate better and to teach you some tools that you can actually use immediately. And one of the things about my seminars is that they're very interactive. So I'm doing little to no talking. I'm explaining things to you, but for the most part, you are talking to each other. It's a very interactive workshop. It's very fun. You're going to learn a lot. You're going to receive a lot. But one of the things that I want any person who attends any seminars with me, my hope, my dream, my prayer is that you take the tools and use them. You take the tools that have been taught to you and you use them, you apply them to your relationship, and you give it time to change. And you begin to work together to do what it takes so that you can have the relationship that you want. Okay, so now I'm leaving for real now. So y'all have a great day. Enjoy the rest of your week. Enjoy Valentine's Day. Have a wonderful, wonderful evening. Thank you again, and I will see you all next week. Bye-bye.